Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 2nd of July of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, we have changes on the ground, we have a lot of very interesting political events, so let's start. And first, let's begin the video with the visit of the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, in Ukraine. Today the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, had a personal meeting with the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. Currently we don't know for sure what exactly these two people were talking about, but according to official information, official statements, the Prime Minister of Hungary arrived in Kiev and invited Zelensky to cease fire in order to begin negotiations with Russia. He believes that this will speed up the process. Zelensky confirmed that he and Orban discussed how to bring a fair and lasting peace closer. In the published video, Orban tells Zelensky at the beginning of the meeting that he wants to hear your vision of chances for peace. What Zelensky responded is still unknown. This article and this post was published today somewhere at 3 p.m. So of course, by the time when this post was published, we didn't know for sure what exactly Zelensky chose and what was his decision. But later we got a report, and we got somewhere at 6 p.m. 3 hours later, we got the final confirmation that Ukraine rejected Orban's proposal for ceasefire. That was stated by Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Igor Zhovka. So we need to understand a few important things. First of all, Viktor Orban arrived in Ukraine not to make a peace in Ukraine, not to start negotiations or to be in charge of this negotiation process or something like this. He arrived in Ukraine with one purpose: to get an answer to proposal that a few days ago Vladimir Putin, the president of Russian Federation, announced before the beginning of a peaceful summit in the Switzerland. And I'll remind you that according to Putin peace proposal, the Ukrainians need to abandon their positions in Kherson area, this is Kherson direction, in Zaporozhye area, including the town by the name of Zaporozhye. The Ukrainians need to abandon their positions in Donetsk People Republic, and the Ukrainians need to abandon their positions in Lugansk People Republic. So this is the Putin's proposal, and today we got the final and 100% confirmation that Ukrainians are not going to sign any agreements with Russia and are not going to follow and to do anything to complete or to be applied or something like this. Furthermore, we got additional report from the Western countries right after the end of this conversation of negotiations between Viktor Orban and Zelensky himself. We got report that the United States of America intends to announce a new package of military assistance to Kiev worth $2.3 billion. So this is probably the price, this is probably the cost that Ukraine will receive for, let's say, rejection of Putin's proposal. And this is also not the end of the story. Right after this meeting, we got another very important update. According to information we have, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Belarusov, arrived in Minsk and probably had a meeting with the Minister of Defense of Belarus, with Lukashenko, the President of Belarus as well. He arrived in Minsk to participate in the Council of Defense Ministers of CIS countries. So this is not like the meeting between Minister of Defense of Russia and Belarus on some topic, but obviously two ministers of defense of allies countries were talking about the current situation on the border between Belarus and Ukraine as well. For example, according to the latest information we have, the Ukrainians concentrated significant number of forces along the border, and as you can see, the Ukrainians brought significant number of armored vehicles, personal carriers. The Ukrainians stretched the forces of 30th Jaeger brigade, that is very fresh, telling the truth, and also there are lots of forces who is under complete control and responsibilities of Kirill Budanov, the head of the main Directorate of Intelligence. So of course we can't tell for sure whether something big is going to happen along the border, but we see that for now at least we have not military but at least political escalation between Belarus and Ukraine as well. And after Zelensky rejected Putin's plan, we don't know for sure what exactly is going to happen in this area. Now let's move further, and before we start discussion, the most important update from the ground, the complete collapse of the eastern Chasiv Yar, I would like to discuss with you once again the video that was published by the Russians today. In this video that we have already discussed in the previous update, the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover a significant number of Su-27. The entire squadron, later, a few hours later or minutes later, the Russians managed to discover this squadron. The Russians destroyed and bombed this territory with Iskanders and probably with some cruise missiles or something like this. And as a result of that attack, at least when talking about this video, we can calculate up to 4 aircrafts were destroyed and 2 were damaged. Later, the Russian sources, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation more precisely, provided us additional updates at the strike, and according to them, the Russians, as a result of group strike with precision weapon on the airfield, managed to destroy 5 Su-27 aircrafts, and they managed to damage at least 2. So the Ukrainians, as a result of Russian attack, lost up to 7 aircraft. Furthermore, before we start making the video, we got another very interesting report that the Russians, as a result of another strike, of another wave of attack, managed to destroy another squadron of Ukrainian Su-27s or any other types of weapon aircrafts. Probably tomorrow we're going to receive additional updates. This is very important attack. This is a fatal strike from the Russian side that led to significant losses from the Ukrainian side, and this is very important victory and very important achievement. I'll try to explain to you why. We know that currently the Russians are attacking the Ukrainian positions in Liptsi, in Glybok. There are very heavy clashes in Glybok, Liptsi, Vovchansk itself, and so on. And for example, recently, starting probably of 2 weeks ago, the Ukrainians start using, let's say, Su-27s, these Su-27s to attack the Russian positions in Glyboko and along the borderlands. For example, in this video that was published a few days ago, we can see that how the Ukrainians managed to discover the concentration of Russian forces, and as a result of of attack of Su-27 with Hammer aviation bomb, the Ukrainians managed to destroy the building temporary positions, with the Russians probably dealing the Russians significant damage and significant losses. Furthermore, we got additional very interesting video, for example, that took place in the vicinity of Nikhatevka. For example, in this video we can see the Su-27s at work. So this video was published by the Ukrainians, by the way, and in this video we can see the process how Su-27 of Armored Forces of Ukraine launched a few more, maybe JDAM missiles or maybe Hammer missiles on Russian positions along the border. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that Ukrainians been using Su-27 massively. We are not talking about, for example, even Volchansk, because let's talk about Volchansk as well. For example, in this video we can see another moment. There are lots of videos where mainly in the vicinity of Vovchansk itself, in the vicinity of the citadel. This is the video. In this video, for example, we can see the use of GBU-39 by the same Su-27s. So the Ukrainians, of course, they don't have FAP 3000, they don't have FAP 1500, but they had lots of missiles of 250 and FAP 500 analogs, and they were using them a lot, and they bombed the Russian positions. So, of course, we're not saying that the Ukrainians were able to deal the same damage as the Russians can do. But the Ukrainians were using Su-27s and they were using bombs a lot. And after the loss of 2 squadrons of Su-27s, most likely the situation for the Ukrainians will become very difficult, because without support, without aviation support, the Ukrainians have no chances, of course, to conduct any successful counter-offensive operation, and of course they will not be able to fight with the Russians even in defense state. Now let's move to the most important update, to Chasiv Yar. Today the Russians reported, and not just reported, today the Russians published geolocation that confirms complete control over the eastern Chasiv Yar, over the block by the name of Kanal. As a result of very heavy clashes that have been taking place probably since February or even earlier, the Russians managed to clear Kanal, to capture this building, to capture the most western building in the eastern Chasiv Yar, and to raise 2 flags. The first flag in the left side is the flag of 98th division that was responsible for the battle for the eastern Chasiv Yar, and the next flag the next flag is the Russian flag, which confirms complete Russian control. Of course, based on this video, we have adjusted the map and colored the entire territory from Kalinovka towards, let's say, Ivanovsk and the complete Russian control. So the main goal by the Russians was completed, was achieved, and now the Russians are able to move further. Of course, we understand that before moving further inside of the central and the western Chasiv Yar, most likely the Russians will finish the battle for Klishchevka foothold and for positions of the armored forces of Ukraine that lays along Seversky Donetsk Kanal from Kurdyumovka in the south to Ivanovska in the northern direction. So this territory will be captured during this process, during this battle that probably will take up to 2 weeks, not more. The Russians will get some rest in the, let's say, eastern Chasiv Yar, and after rotation process, after regrouping, the Russians will continue. And the most important, that the Russians now have possibilities to move from Kalinovka in the western direction towards the northern Chasiv Yar. The Russians having their foothold and their positions in Stupki Golubkovsky and German forest can attack the central Chasiv Yar from the southeast. And of course, the Russians will use the positions, let's say former Ukrainian supply roads and support roads to attack the central Chasiv Yar from the east. Obviously, these three directions the Russians will choose for further offensive, and of course nothing can stop the Russians right now to move further in direction of Grigorovka along Seversky Donetsk Kanal, because, for example, during the previous 24 hours we got additional updates from different mappers that, for example, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this territory. For now, we don't have any geolocations confirming this, but most likely in a day or in a 2 or in a week we're going to receive some, and this progress confirms that the Russians also have some certain plans about the village by the name of Grigorovka. So, but not now, obviously not today, not tomorrow. The Russians need to, maybe the Russians finished regrouping before the final battle for this part, and they have already brought and redeployed fresh forces, and now those the forces of 98th division who captured this territory will go back for some rotation to get some rest, and fresh forces will continue. We don't know for sure, but anyway, up to 2 weeks the Russians probably requires for resuming their offensive further in the western direction. Now let's move to Donetsk, New York agglomeration. We got lots of very interesting updates, and I'm talking about geolocations. To understand the current situation, of course, it's better to increase the numbers of updates, and geolocations and number of updates give us a lot of interesting information, lots of interesting ideas. For example, yesterday we got the video of how the Russians were bombing this part of Pivnichne, and today we got the video of how the Russians were bombing Zalizne and the next settlement to the west. In this video, we can see that as a result of FPV drone strike or artillery strike, the warehouse or temporary position of Ukrainians was destroyed, and which confirms, as you can see, based on these two geolocations, that the Russians do have some certain focus in this area. And first of all, they are interested in defeating of Ukrainians exactly in this direction. Also, we got during the previous few days, probably 2 or 3 days, we got also lots of geolocations from let's say from the northern part of the same foothold. In this video we can see how the Russians were bombing this territory with STOS flamethrower systems. Summarizing everything using just a simple logic, we can make a conclusion that the Russians currently are trying to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt in this direction, and that the Russians are trying to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt in this direction as well. So summarizing everything, we see that the Russians are planning to use another pincer attack and to let's say bypass Pivnichne from the southern part, and to bypass the main stronghold from the northern part, and to just to encircle Ukrainian positions, or to create another cauldron, or to force the Ukrainians to fall back. So everything in front of your screens and geolocations are telling us that the Russians probably have this let's say plan to move further. Now let's move to the western Avdiivka direction, where we can see also significant number of geolocations. And the most important update is that the Russians from Sokol managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter and to reach the northern outskirts of Novoselovka-Pershe. We got the video that was published by the Ukrainian sources of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this area, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, some geolocations were discovered, and one of the geolocations took place here. The Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russian forces who were trying to storm the stronghold that located further in the southern direction. So this video confirms that the Russians also are trying to attack Novoselovka-Pershe from the northern direction. I'll remind you that during the previous few days we also got updates from different mappers that the Russians are moving in this direction as well. So as you can see, another pincer's attack where the Russians are trying to attack Novoselovka-Pershe from the south and from the northern direction, and of course to force the Ukrainians to fall back. Currently, as we discussed in the previous updates, the Ukrainians have just one supply road left. This is the road we are talking about from Zhelana to Novoselovka-Pershe, and telling the truth, the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to use this road for 100% because the Russians control this territory completely. Hundreds of drones, hundreds of losses that Ukrainians suffered since the beginning of May. So this is not a very easy thing to evacuate soldiers. Probably as for Novoselovka-Pershe, we are facing right now the worst situation for the Ukrainians with supply and support of any stronghold since the beginning of the special military operation. As for Avdiivka, as for Bakhmut, as for any other stronghold the Ukrainians were defending, they had almost every time they had the same situation of some operational encirclement, but the losses were around 60-70%. As for Novoselovka direction, probably the losses of Ukrainians are about 90 or even more percent. For example, in this video we can see another Bradley that was damaged or destroyed by the Russians during another evacuation or rotation process, or during attempts to escape this territory towards more reliable positions in Zhelana and Selidova, but the Russians managed to discover the movements of Ukrainian Bradley, and as soon as they discovered, they destroyed it with FPV drone strike. Now let's move further. We have additional updates on the line between Yevgenievka, Sokol, Progress. According to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to capture additional tree line, additional strongholds and fortifications of the Ukrainians. Most likely the Russians are going to move further in the western direction, and once again another Bradley was destroyed as a result of Russian fire with a very interesting drone, as you can see. So just as for today, as for 2nd of July, just during one day, we got lots of videos confirming that Ukrainians lost from 3 to 4 armored vehicles in this direction. Very interesting updates are coming from Yasnobrodovka, Karlovka area. Today the neutral mappers reported that the Russians captured Yasnogrodovka completely. The Ukrainians abandoned their positions, and those who managed to survive the battle for the village currently is heading or already managed to reach Karlovka and this stronghold, and now they're moving even further in direction of Kalinova and maybe to Selidova. And on the other side we see that the Russians are pushing along the line Nitailova, Karlovka itself, and today as a result of another let's say episode of clashes of another day, the Russians captured additional positions, and we have the video confirming the Russian presence there. For example, in this video, according to the author of this video, we can see the Russian soldier from engineering forces. He dropped grenade inside of the building, and then as a result of explosion the entire building was reduced to ruins. Probably that building was used by the Ukrainians as a machine gun position or sniper position. Anyway, summarizing everything, we see that every single day we got more and more gains in Russian favor. Currently the Ukrainians can show any resistance to the Russians, and I believe that the blames right now that we see a lot of let's say negative information, a lot of negative things in direction of Syrsky. We start receiving updates about the conflict between Syrsky and Zelensky himself. We see that after Zaluzhny left army, we see complete collapse of Ukrainian army. We see lots of problems. Corruption has been increased significantly in comparison with the previous period. So we see that the Ukrainian army is ruining, is destroying, is killing itself. Ukraine army furthermore is killing itself. We will discuss this thing in just in a second. We have very interesting and important updates from Crimea forest. So let's continue. Let's finish with this direction, then we will move back. As for additional updates, we got reports that the Russians captured the fields in the vicinity of Nivoyska. These fields were captured by the Russians, and as I understand, soon the Ukrainians will also decide to fall back from Nivoyska itself towards maybe the northern part of Krasnogorovka, and after that further in direction Zhelana Druga. So we see that this defense belt of armed forces of Ukraine can't stand against the Russian attacks, and the Ukrainians are running and running and running. So very critical, as you can see, and very difficult situation. As for South Donetsk direction, we haven't received anything important, as well as about Urozhaine, Staromayorsk and Zaporozhye, just regular activity, so we will not focus on these lots. Let's talk about Crimea forest, and I would like to discuss with you very interesting reports and situation with the 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov. Now we have a lot of very interesting details, and I would like to share with you with my opinion about the current status. As I understand, this is probably also very important piece of puzzle these days. For now, I don't know for sure what exactly is happening, but most likely this 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov is going to play a significant role in Ukraine during the next from 3 till 6 months. Let's follow, because very interesting situation is going to happen. What I'm trying to tell you, during the previous months we got significant number of updates about this brigade, especially about this brigade. And I'll remind you that first of all, this brigade is let's say discovered as a terrorist organization, recognized as a terrorist organization in Russian Federation. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that this 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov was responsible for protection of Mariupol, and that was the core brigade during the battle for this stronghold. So what is so important? First of all, I would like to remind you that there was a very interesting article that the United States of America had the personal sanctions on this brigade. For some reason, there were no restrictions, no problems to supply and support any brigade in Ukraine, but 12th Special Purpose Brigade was under sanctions and restrictions of the United States of America. And during June or late May, the United States of America, let's say, removed the restrictions, and these brigades started receiving everything they wanted. So this is the first very important update. According to information we have, this brigade was under sanctions due to all these Nazi things, like this brigade is openly spread the propaganda of this, let's call it like this, type of living, a type of thinking or something like this. So this is the first important update about this brigade. The second important piece of news about this brigade is that a few days ago the commander of this brigade wrote a special letter, open letter, about General Sodal, and after that the General Sodal was captured by the Ukrainian special forces. He was arrested, and currently there is an investigation against him, investigation into the activities of that general. Of course, lots of houses, apartments, money were already found by the investigation forces of Ukraine, and of course this general probably will be captured, will be arrested, and the rest of his life he will spend in jail. But what is important about the situation is that everybody, almost every single Ukrainian soldier hated that General Sodal. And the commander of Azov, when he wrote this letter, after this letter general was captured, he was like something like a rescue guy. He's like a rescue team, a rescue command, rescue brigade that managed to resolve the conflict and very bad situation in Ukraine and to get the truce, and they were fighting for regular Ukrainian soldiers, and they won. So they in front of different regular soldiers of Ukrainian army, these guys were like angels, like good guys who managed to resolve their problems and to punish bad guys. This is the second important update. The third important update is that during the previous days and during the previous 3 months, the Ukrainians suffered significant problems and significant losses all over the entire territory to Ukraine. The Ukrainians were defeated in Kharkiv. The Russians started using FAB 3000. The Russians entered Sumy region. The Russians managed to capture a significant number of villages in the northern Kupiansk direction. The Russians captured Razdolovka, Spornaya, Bilogorovka. The Ukrainians were defeated in eastern Chasiv Yar. The Ukrainians lost their positions in the vicinity of in Donetsk agglomeration. Significant results from the Russian side and the biggest defeat ever since the beginning of the special military operation in this direction. The Ukrainians lost Avdiivka, Acheretina. Some brigades abandoned their positions without letting know to their neighboring brigades about the situation. And there is just one brigade in the entire Ukrainian army who, during the previous 2-3 months, managed to attack and to get additional footholds and to get additional positions and basically to restore control over some lost positions. And we are talking about 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov, because during the previous 3 months they managed to 2-3 months they managed to restore control over this territory, right? So this is the third thing that we can see about this brigade since the beginning of June. And the fourth thing about this brigade is that they have published additional open letter, and they were asking very important things. This is the letter that was published by the commander of this brigade. I have 5 questions for recruiters, for recruiting service of Ukraine, those guys who are kidnapping people all over the entire Ukraine, and you've been seen lots of videos probably for the previous 2-3 months or something since the beginning of Ukraine's greatest mobilization. So he have 5 questions. Why are mobilization measures not being carried out? First, in the evening and restaurants and recreation facilities. Second, in so-called offices and business centers. Third, according to available organized criminal groups databases in the police. 5, in gyms during training. 5th, in the Novopechersky, Lipki and other elite areas of the city. So summarizing everything, he was asking, why are you mobilizing poor, sick, blind, with disabilities, people who doesn't have anybody who can protect them, who has no connections with mafia, who doesn't have any connections with some people from government offices? Why do you mobilize these guys? But why don't you mobilize rich people? Why don't you mobilize, powerful people, criminals from mafia, and many other groups of Ukrainian society who is basically protected from mobilization, and we don't know even a single name of anybody who was mobilized from these groups of people. And this is the first, let's say, positive PR action of this brigade. And this is, of course, not an accident. This is obviously a chain of events. The main reason and the main purpose of these events to make PR for this brigade. But for now, I don't know for sure what is exact goals and what is the real purpose of these things. Obviously, the Ukrainians and probably the United States of America has a lot of plans about this brigade, and maybe something interesting is going to happen during the next few days, and this brigade is going to be in charge of this process. And according to my understanding of the situation, maybe Zelensky do have some secret negotiations with Russia or with Belarus to stop war, or through Viktor Orban or something like this. So that's why the United States of America were making this brigade Azov so popular. So in case if Zelensky decide to fall back from this special military operation, the United States of America and the Western countries need to have power in Ukraine they can base on, and they need to know that the entire army will support them because they're so good, because they are fighting for the interests of Ukrainian soldiers all over the line of combat contact. So this is very interesting situation, and we need to follow these updates. And as for Chasiv Yar, probably the most important update during the previous 24 hours are that the Russians continue using FAB 3000. Today we got a lot of very interesting videos of how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions with FAB 3000. And another important thing, that the Russians managed to cross Seversky Donetsk river in the vicinity. So this is the FAB 3000. The Russians managed to cross the river in the vicinity of Burgovatka and to establish the foothold stronghold, let's say, in the eastern southern part of Vovchansk, and now they have possibilities to attack the Ukrainians in their flank and in their rear, and that can lead to complete defeat of the Ukrainians in this direction as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.